Okay, so we're all muted. I'm going to open the room now.
Welcome, everybody, to tonight's conversation with Stephen Gillenhall. We are excited to have you here. We're delighted to have the film screening in Utero that has run for a few days already and is continuing to run over the coming days. How we begin is who we become. And I believe that the conversation tonight with Stephen will hugely deepen the experience of watching the movie for all of us, and hopefully also how we will be able to work with the material of the movie in the future, with ourselves, with those around us. So just so you know, there is subtitling which has been activated, and you can activate that on your own screen. You can also shift between gallery view and speaker view, so really notice what is most helpful for you at any one time. I'm just going to move to gallery view now because I enjoy seeing you all. Also, we will be recording, and this recording will only be shared with those that have signed up to the call but couldn't make it tonight. There'll also be a live stream of the call, and there is a translation to German tonight. Thank you, Alfred, for doing that for us. And also maybe Anna or Sunita, someone from the team, would be great to again share the link for the movie screening in the chat. And we'll do that again in the email afterwards. So we want to make sure you don't miss it. So I've been very, very lucky over the past weeks and months to forge a conversation with Stephen. I think Stephen was really looking for Thomas Hubel, and instead he got, he reached me and I started having conversations with him. And to be quite frank, at the beginning, I didn't know how famous he was. So I just started into these conversations thoroughly enjoying the beauty and the depth of this human being that I personally have learned from, am learning with. And I'm really grateful for the connection and super grateful also for the friendship that is growing between the Pocket Project and Stephen's organizations, the Identity Development Institute, which Stephen founded. And I just want to say a few more words about Stephen's work as a film and television director, a writer and a producer. So this is the official bio bit. His feature directing credits include Paris Trout, for which Stephen received a Directors Guild of America Award for outstanding directorial achievement in dramatic specials, as well as the theatrical films Waterland, A Dangerous Woman, Losing Isaiah, and Home Ground. In 2012, Stephen received a Directors Guild of America nomination for outstanding directorial achievement in movies, for television, for Girl Fight. He also co-wrote and directed the indie film Grassroots, which came out in 2012, and recently the film So Be It, based on the best-selling young adult novel of the same name. Stephen directed the Peabody Award-winning dramatic series Rectify for the Sundance Channel, Billions for Showtime, and Bosch for Amazon. His producing credits include the TV movies Living with the Dead, The Patron Saint of Liars, A Shattered Mind, and the feature documentary In Utero, with more to be added soon. Stephen is a regular contributor to the Huffington Post and Thrive Global. Yeah, and you'll get a chance to meet Stephen much more fully tonight. I just want to take a moment to welcome you, Stephen, and then we'll go into a short attunement before we really go into the conversation. So
So I'll
thank you
just
for
say
being
hi and wait to be attuned. I'm in LA, so being attuned is a good idea. So
here.
go for it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and this is how we usually start the community calls with the Pocket Project, because we know that many of the experiences we speak about were really overwhelming to us as individuals, when we address individual, ancestral, collective trauma. This is what we're speaking about, experiences that were overwhelming to our nervous systems. And we know that it's only because we are in community and we allow our nervous systems to ground, but then also more consciously relate to each other, that we become this bigger collective body that is able to process more, to host more, and to support each other, to co-regulate and to ground. So let's just take a moment now to maybe even close our eyes when that is, if that is comfortable to you, but also if not, you can just relax your eyes. So whatever is most comfortable to you. And you might just breathe out a few times more deeply. Yeah, notice what it feels like to arrive in the space together. The shared space online in Zoom, but also this very precious body space that you live in. So maybe we can all allow our breaths to bring us home more fully to our embodiment. And probably all of us here are currently sitting in adult bodies. And just notice how it is for this adult body to ground, to feel your feet, to feel energy moving. And maybe there are places in your body that would like to relax more, that would like to sink more deeply into your base, into the soles of your feet, and through your feet, connect more fully with the ground below. Yeah, and let's also take a moment to connect to the younger selves that are alive in this body. Reaching out to the more fragile nervous system embodiment that we inhabited as children, as small children, as babies, in utero. And maybe we can allow for a moment our adult bodies to embrace, to offer a warm embrace to the younger selves. A holding space. And already now noticing that this is not something you need to do alone tonight, but that we are here together. And that we can share a space of compassion and care for the young self that lives in us every day. Maybe you just want to notice what emotions or feelings come alive as we create conscious space for these areas. And also taking a moment to allow our brain, our space of the mind to relax more fully into the body. Offering a witnessing space to all of these layers in us. Physical, emotional, mental, and the roots that go back so deep. And together we'll invite our witnessing presence to be here with us tonight. As we travel, we hear from Stephen, we share this space together. And maybe before we move into the conversation, let's also take a moment to slowly open our eyes and bring our witnessing awareness to each other in the gallery view. So if you haven't already, I invite you to shift to gallery view. And you might want to move and just have a look at who's here. Yeah, and as we see each other, we can already sense that there's something that has been touched in us just by this welcoming of the younger parts. And as we see each other, that we see that, we welcome that in each other, that we're not just functioning adults here, but also vulnerable young beings, and that we offer space. And that we travel together here tonight in support of each other. Great. Thank you. Thank you. And with that, Stephen, it's, yeah, as I already said, it's been truly a joy for me to get to know you. And thank you so much for all you're moving in the world and all you have moved, and how you also speak to us through imagery and moving us so deeply, because there is a deep connection to us through the imagery, even of in utero. Actually, oh dear, I'm now remembering, but maybe we'll do it later on in the call, Scott, because we did want to show the trailer. But now I just like to start with you, and I know that there's a few people here that might not have watched the movie yet, so we just thought we want to give you that taster. But maybe we can decide together, Stephen, when there's a good moment just to share the trailer.
Well, can you hear me? Am I unmuted now? There was weird things going
You're
on.
unmuted, and
Okay, good.
I can hear
So,
you.
so I think actually being a filmmaker, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So I'd say, why don't we show it now, just to kind of get the ball rolling, and then jump in. It's not that long. I think it's like 2 minutes or something like that. I think. Roughly.
It's exactly. It's
Yeah.
not
So let's a
and
little
it's
entertainment.
amazing, right? Just these 2 minutes. How much can be transmitted in 2 minutes? So let's do that. Thank you.
Intrauterine life is not a paradise, as some people try to make us believe.
This substance, which is the potential of a human being, feels every little feeling that the mother feels.
We are the receiver of all the happiness and of all the difficulties of our parents.
This is something that we're just beginning to explore gene by gene.
We're really pushing back that time frame to say that there are factors environmentally that happen prenatally.
Human beings are affected by the environment as soon as they have an environment. And that means as soon as we're implanted in the womb.
In our society, there's so much rushing. You're so busy, everything going.
Fetuses of mothers who are high anxious, they're showing differences almost, we want to say, in temperament.
We see reduced brain volume, reduced gray matter density.
People are conceiving, carrying, and birthing children under increasingly stressed conditions. Stress that affected one generation will be played out very exactly in the next generation.
People have been through wars, famine, disasters of all sorts.
When we see dysfunction in people, we're actually seeing the imprint of that early experience.
An adult trauma is really a fetal trauma.
And this has been the missing piece, the foundation for our whole life.
When you come to a point of knowing what is the cause of all this, when you have an answer, like the door opens.
So I'm seeing some of the comments. We thought we were going to see the movie. We thought we were going to see the movie. you'll be able to see the movie after this, and you were able to see it before, thanks to, technology now. So now we're going to just talk about it. So even if you haven't seen the movie yet, and hopefully a good number of you have, I think it's worth it to kind of talk through what it's about in any case. And as usual, everything that can go wrong goes wrong. So for some of you who didn't see it, welcome to the real world that is also filmmaking, which is, you name it, it goes wrong. And it's sort of, you have to kind of, roll with the punches, as they say, and kind of enjoy it anyway. So I hope, even if you haven't seen it, you'll enjoy our conversation here. So.
Yeah, and just to say, for us, it was so important that you all see the movie in the highest possible quality, and that is simply through screening it into your own home. So the wonderful thing about this is that you can, firstly, I really believe that the conversation will deepen your experience of the movie, but also this enables you to invite friends, partners afterwards, and really think about who do you want to invite to watch this together. So I deeply hope that you will love the experience of deepening your experience with these possibilities. Yeah. Stephen, I wanted to start with a very obvious question. What moved you to make this movie?
If I were to step back a little bit from it, I would say at the deepest level, it was the pain that I basically experienced most of my life, pushed away, living my life. I think I found that, pain, at least in my case, was a motivator to go do something with my life, not because I was necessarily trying to do something terrific or good. It just was almost a distraction from the pain. And I think this is true of a lot of people. Pain was pretty buried, but it would sometimes come up and would emerge. And so I was in therapy a lot. In fact, I was in therapy from college on, trying to figure out what's wrong with me, because there's clearly something wrong with me. Now, that went in different directions, and as therapy has gone, I think I saw 30 to 40 therapists by the time I was done. And also analysis, and my doctor, one of the doctors I had, Dr. Bernard Bale, had really been exploring through his analysis with people the impact of the in utero experience. He was a complicated guy. He's in the movie. If you've seen him, you'll have known about him. And I'm going to talk a little tough about him in ways. He was very much about the degree to which what happens to you in utero impacts you for the rest of your life. And I was working on that with dreams, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, I have grown children and now 2 grandchildren. I had remarried, and Kathleen and I wanted to have a baby. I definitely loved having children and wanted to do it again. And we were having a lot of problems. And only a filmmaker would say, why don't I make a movie about this, talking to all the experts to try and figure out what's wrong? So that's what I did. It was guided by Dr. Bale's premise. The problem was he really felt he had discovered this. But as we began to dig into it, a little like the story of the steam engine, which was discovered in about the same time all around the world. It was talk about collective trauma, collective knowledge also, I think, exists. And in this case, it turned out there were many, many people who were starting to understand, it's just common sense really, that the real issues start in utero. And I think I'm suddenly just seeing me, and I don't like that. Hold on a second. Let me just see if I can take me off the screen here. Where did you go? Where did you go? I like talking
Well,
to you.
we're all here still, Stephen. We're all really enjoying seeing you.
I know. You can see me. I don't want to see me.
But you could just go, why don't you go to gallery view? So just in the top corner, if you just go to gallery view.
God knows. I know these
then
things.
you notice.
There we go. Okay, that's better. No,
Great.
it's just,
And you're
I'd
just
rather
one
see
of
you.
us.
Yes,
Great.
yes. An audience. Okay, good. So we started to make this film, Kathleen and I, and really began to uncover the degree to which trauma, because of course, if you have a house and everything's working except the plumbing, what you want to fix is the plumbing. So I think I want to be careful, even with this documentary now, to go, there are a lot of really positive things that happen in the womb, but there are some real problems too. And we want to address the problems and but never lose track of the fact that there's something miraculous. And what I think we've discovered, and what I've discovered more since the movie, is that we are miraculous organisms. And if something goes wrong, if there's stress, or a mother, for instance, is in an earthquake or in a war, or all those things while she's pregnant, if you've seen the movie, that's talked about, that the organism is evolving miraculously to survive. And I think that's maybe the most important thing for me that's emerged out of this, that I had plenty of trauma in utero, and I know about it now, because we can now go back and really start to see what happened to each of us. And that's another conversation, because this film is just really about uncovering the truth of this. And that almost everything, I think now, that comes from that period of time that's often pathologized, schizophrenia or bipolar or anxiety or depression, all can find its roots, it's just common sense, in what happened in utero. So I think that's really the good news, that we can go back, I think, now and unpack it. And the movie really started that for me, certainly. There's been a long journey since then. Does that answer anything you asked? I'm not sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think what you were just speaking about, because the movie kind of opens up our eyes to the intricacy, the miraculousness, the beauty also of life before birth. And it's, I often feel that in this work, around working with individual, ancestral, collective trauma, it's like the one frontier that we haven't fully explored on this earth is this one of going inside. And this is like this frontier of moving into utero and seeing life before before birth. How interesting. That's an interesting before birth, coming onto earth is miraculous, and I know in the movie you say that in prenatal life, every second, 50,000 new neurons are being created. And at, even the beginning of the trailer, there's this association between stars and the neurons as we travel, right? And the sensitivity of those neurons, and the fragility of their creation, and how movements in the outer world would impact on that creative power of evolution. It feels so fragile and so sensitive, and yeah, maybe you could share more about the reality of the impacts that you have learned about by making the movie, by exploring this topic.
I think by exploring the topic, the movie was my door into, and I think it's often true with science. I mean, there's a lot of common sense to that, to what just everything happens, starts in utero. There's common sense to that, but you want to have science, and certainly I believe science is a critical piece of confirming what common sense says. So you talk about how fragile this organism is, and it's profoundly fragile. And what people don't know, this is sort of a sidebar, what people don't know is that miscarriages are very healthy things. And one of the things we learned was, if you are early on pregnant, don't wait until you're sure the pregnancy is okay. Tell everybody. So if you have a miscarriage, you're not doing it alone. That miscarriages are, I've been through a few of them, and I'm the dad, not the mother. They're profoundly difficult. And, it is a death, and it is a loss. And to not have opened up about it in the very beginning, leaves you alone. And I think, what is it that I'm not going to quote this badly, but what Gabor says is, safety is not, something is, oh, I can never remember it now. Safety is in connection, to make connections. So I think miscarriages are normal and healthy. And there's even indications in some ways with abortions, for instance, where if the mother is really going, I can't do this, I can't do this. And this is a big piece of what we've uncovered and goes beyond even the movie. If you're pregnant, and this is what another movie I'm working on now is about, talk to the baby, think about the baby, feel the baby, resonate this baby. All these things, make a connection from the very, very start. And if you can't do it, oftentimes the baby will let go and will miscarry himself or herself. Other times the baby's going, no way, I'm going to fight like crazy. And I think I want to sort of adjust how vulnerability and fragility as an adult, even being vulnerable, being lost, being bewildered, I can speak to that a lot in making movies, is very, very powerful. It's actually very powerful. It's when you hide the vulnerability from yourself that you get into trouble and you get lost. So while these little beings are very fragile and what's happening is incredibly complex and can be damaged by things that go on outside, the system biologically and ultimately psychologically will begin to adjust. So for instance, if something dreadful happens and there's more and more evidence that the most sophisticated part of the brain comes on first, not the reptilian brain, but the most sophisticated, so that it can adjust biologically and other ways as well to any kind of problems. So for instance, if something really stressful happens, the brain, the organism will protect the brain and let the legs go. So later on, you would discover that there would be problems with the legs, but what had happened was the brain was protected. Or, and you can go through all of these things. It becomes more and more difficult to pathologize anything that psychology basically pathologizes. They're actually brilliant strategies. And I think it's very important because later on, if you work your way back to the roots and you realize how really miraculous we are, real healing can take place, profound healing. So I think the uncovering, I mean, I'm just a messenger. I just shoot a movie and talk to smart people and then learn from that. There are brilliant, brilliant people in the movie who have really uncovered. The one person I didn't get was Bessel van der Kolk at the time. And I wish we had, because I think he's really laid out some really important issues about the body keeping the score and the body keeping in the organism, a miraculously complicated, actually kind of infinite organism. The details of that little being that we were. And if it was traumatized, it's frozen. The trauma really is about freezing and burying a part of the wounded part. And I'm getting a little lost now, so where are we? You're muted though. See, there you are.
Well, that's great because I'm also just getting a request from translation to slow down. So
Okay,
maybe
all
that
right.
will help us. And as you speak about the beauty and the power of bewilderment, right? That can also have space here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it touches me very deeply as you speak about miscarriage and also the deep connection, forging a deep connection with your children, because even just in my generation, I had a miscarriage which was hidden when I was young. My mother didn't connect to me when I was in the womb because it wasn't like children weren't at that time. And this is it's only, 55 years ago now, it's not a long time ago that this wasn't seen as something that was done to forge such a deep relationship, and miscarriages were hidden as if it's a blemish or something to hide away. So, there's so many doors that we're opening here, a softening into a very soft part of our human history. And You know, when I first watched the movie, I think, as you were also saying before, that this movie is not necessarily easy for mothers, because already we feel such a heavy responsibility for the well-being of our children. And, you know, in Africa, many places in the world, people say each child needs a village. You know, it's too much to put this on the mother. And I think that's also really what the movie is saying, is that this is not on the mother. This is on the community to protect the mother in such a way that the beauty and the preciousness of this ceremony of pregnancy and life-giving and birthing is really held in sacredness. But I wonder whether you could share more about that, and also the role of fathers in protecting this space, because I can imagine that many women feel quite strongly after the movie of, oh dear, you know, what have I done to my children?
Well, I think it's a very, very complicated issue. I think it's as complicated going inwards as it is to go out. In fact, it does feel to me sometimes when I look at the James Webb Telescope and everything about the universe out there, which is incomprehensible. I mean, really, you can pretend you know, but they're now saying the whole black hole theory, it's all beginning to fall apart with the new data. It's just as complicated and difficult to go inside. So the idea that one feels comfortable to judge themselves or to judge anyone else is delusional, as far as I'm concerned. I was thinking as you were talking that in the 1980s, psychiatry, psychology began to be, because of the feminist movement, infiltrated by women. Before that, it had been a patriarchal structure in which Freud and people like that really didn't consider women in a lot of ways all that important. But when that happened, everything began to shift. And I think the power of the feminine is obviously extremely important. And it's very complex. And I think it's beyond miraculous, the whole process of carrying a child. I think also that there's a profound difference between trauma and stress. There's a lot to be said, and it's talked about in the movie, that a mother being stressed and a child being stressed as well is kind of calisthenics for coming out into the world. It's not a bad thing. And, you know, and even terror, which can be, you know, from all different reasons, you know, for all different reasons. I mean, violence in the home, drugs, alcohol, you name it, there are all these things. I think now, as a community, we're beginning to be able to address this later in life. That in utero is really laying down the groundwork for psychology and other people around this to start to see that, yes, trauma and what's happened in the, you know, the whole, everything you've been talking about, Kosha, you know, I hadn't even really thought about, you know, community trauma and, you know, global trauma and all of that. And I'm going, that's just another piece of the puzzle. This is all, we're all in this together. That if we begin to really deconstruct trauma and how we react to it, there's great hope. There's great hope, because at the key to this in my own life, as I've been able to go back and remember more and more of what happened to me in utero, I'm discovering this little kid, you know, like when you were doing the you know, the attunement, he was going, come on, let's get going. We want to get going. Come on, enough. And I'm going, and I love this little kid. What are we sitting here for? Why don't we just get going with this thing? You know, and it's like that energy of the little being is, you know, and more, I'm just partying half the time as I'm dealing with very, very deep things, because that little being was excited about being here and loved his mother loved her. And one of the separations that happened was my mother was not able to love me. She wasn't aware of it because the science wasn't there. She had her own problems. That didn't keep me from loving her. I loved her madly, 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 madly. And I hung on, you know, and I made it through. And it's way more complicated. The deeper I've gotten into it, the more it feels like I'm in a rocket ship going out into space, only I'm going back to the center of me. And the more I get to the center, by the way, Kosha, and it's a whole other thing. I used to be an atheist, and I was like, you know, I'm in Hollywood, for God's sakes, you know, if it made violent movies and blah, blah, blah. The more that little being is going, it's really big out there. There's something going on way bigger than you think it is, Mr. Hollywood director. It's much cooler. So there's this energy, this youthful energy that we can get access to if we're prepared to face the terror and the despair and the pain that's also intermixed with that. And to judge mothers after the way women have been treated through the centuries, or even to judge men, you're being, you know, the whole thing is, let's stop the judgment thing. Let's just move forward. Because, okay, I'm going to blame my grandfather for what he did to me. Well, wait a minute, what was done to him? Oh, and what happened before that? And go on back. You can just go crazy trying to figure out who to blame. And I just keep coming back to the joy of getting deep inside this stuff and starting to see, oh, my mother was actually communicating with me. She didn't even know it when I was in there. And she was pretty amazing, even though she's 23 years old and a party girl. There were things going on with her that have allowed me, even though things got screwed up and she drank too much, and then later on in her life, she had big problems and things happened to her, still there were things going on in there that was so miraculous. And yet kind of like the whole universe out there is no less miraculous than what was going on in there. Okay, I went down a rabbit hole, but so it goes.
Well, I went with you. So I'm in there now. I'm with your mum. I want to get to know her more, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is, you know, just as you say that, I know that one of the most amazing things for me was indeed giving birth. And it does feel in that moment as if the heavens open, at least that was my experience, and the heavens take place on earth through this sacred child. And as you share about your love for your mother, I think that the love that my children, my baby children had for me is the one thing that opened my heart.
Yeah.
You know, because there was nothing like it. There was no love as innocent, as pure, as humongously total that I had ever come across. And it taught me something that I hadn't learned before in life, which is, something about the truth of love and also the connection to spirit that love carries, right? So there's a lot of that. And, you know, as you share that this is also an entrance door, that looking at life in utero and trauma in utero isn't just a journey down a rabbit hole. I mean, you have beautiful allusions to Alice in Wonderland during,
Yeah, sure.
right? So, but that this is not just depressed, dark, painful, but it's actually about uncovering true treasure that lies hidden in these origins of life. And, you know, you also refer to the Matrix and Neo's journey of needing to decide, do I unplug of the formation of that, you could say intergenerational trauma that I come from, that shapes me. And I wonder how it has been for you and how you see it also for the people that you work with, the kind of measurement of the pain and the joy in the journey, because they're both so strong. And sometimes I think that both just become more intense as we go deeper. But what is your experience and your sense around this?
Well, I think science which I adore, is dangerous in the present for everything that's come before, because science is going to throw that in the trash can and move on. And if you're a scientist and you're holding on to what is, you're getting in the way of what is going to be. So in the movie, I have problems with the movie now. There are issues with the movie. And as I was saying, I've sort of broken it apart now, and I'm doing little pieces. I'm doing wraparounds to sort of really try and explain it. The concept of the imprint, which is Dr. Bernard Bail, very much a patriarchal figure, and in the end, I had a lot of problems with him, is incorrect, frankly, because it sort of says the mother did this, and it's, she imprints the child. And that's not at all what happens. The mother experiences something or has experienced something, and it's in her biology. And it affects through the umbilical cord, through resonating, through just being in this organism, the mother, that is going through whatever with all the chemistry and all the other things that are involved with that. And you get back to genetic, you get back to quantum mechanics, and you get into energy, which I'm not going to get into. But what really happens is not an imprint at all. It's the baby going, I got to figure my way out to survive. And okay, maybe it's too much. I'm gonna have to let go. And whatever happens to us, and I have I've become, this is difficult to say, I'm going to say it out loud. I am pro-life and pro-choice. I think one has to, and also I live in a quantum age where opposites can be true. I understand why people say you're killing babies. That's what's happening. And I totally understand and completely support that mothers have to have a choice. And the movie sort of half goes into it, and we actually had some political issues around it. I want to keep much more pro-choice in this, but some people are nervous about that, to be honest. But I think that what, I got off track a little because it's the first time I've ever really said that out loud, but I really feel that we have to be respectful of everybody in this process. But a mother must have a choice in all of this. And I think what I want to come back to again, even more, is that imprint, which is, it's the baby figuring out how to make it through with the mother's help. It's very complicated. There's the placenta, there's a lot of other things going on. And as we come out, we've evolved strategies for surviving. And that's why stress is very valuable. Don't worry about stress if you're pregnant. Don't worry about all that stuff. That's not where the problem sits. In fact, there isn't really a problem if we could just get back to the root. So the baby is figuring out, and I know it was true with me. Yes, certainly I had some bad strategies that didn't work when I was teenage years or even as an adult, but they were great when I was 9 months in utero. And so it's not an imprint at all. It's the organism, it's the baby restructuring themselves to come into the world. So if it's a stressful world and there's a problem in the family, that little baby has figured out how to more or less function there by the time he's born. There's a whole section, I'm talking too fast. There's a whole section in the movie about World War II, where babies in the womb learned how not to have much food. When the war was over and they were growing up, they had real problems, really for the rest of their lives, because they had been structured to have no food, and now there's all this food around. So, which is miraculous. Darwin is wrong. It doesn't take 10 generations to change. It happens one time in the womb to make major adjustments. Sorry I talked so fast back there.
Yeah, beautiful that you noticed. And I feel like, I also loved the moment where you spoke about the choice of the mother, and you noticed that this was becoming shaky to you. That there's a part in you that became shaky, and that we're allowed to feel it with you, that you're not alone here right now with that. And I think those are actually precious moments for us, because this is actually a deep question which the movie brings. And as you say, it's a question that is spoken about in the movie, but it doesn't go in depth. And it's such a huge political issue right now.
In our country, of course, it's separate. It's split the country in half. what I meant to get to, and then I got a little lost, is the issue becomes the issue of a soul. If the baby, when I've had miscarriages, you go, maybe he or she will come. It was a he in one case. He'll come back next time. We even had a name for him. So right away you're going, there's a soul here. So it's part of what I think, a lot of people don't take into account. And I understand it because religion, I've had huge problems with religion in my life. But to sort of also own that the people who are right to life people, who I do respect, and I grew up with a lot of them, don't allow the other side to say, well, what about the soul? Maybe we let the baby go and they'll come back again some other time. And maybe the journey, and people have talked about this, is for them at the time was to be in a womb for a little while and then leave. Who knows? We don't know. So the level of uncertainty inside is at least equal to the uncertainty of going out into space and trying to figure out what's out there. But the documentary plants a flag, I think, a beginning flag in all that.
Yeah, and that we offer the safeguarding of women to have their own choice around sexual intercourse, which is not a given in so many countries. That should really be the beginning. And that's also, I think, what the movie leads us to, is this deeper appreciation and honoring of this time, and understanding that this is something that we as society and we as humanity could start embracing in a new way. So maybe you would like to share more about the intention, the impact of the movie, the intention you had, the impact that you see the movie having, but also where you are going with it now.
Well, it's interesting. I don't think, in my journey down to that little boy who I sort of described a little bit, that little kid, and tiny, 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 even without words sometimes, just the distress, the trauma, the darkness. And I think the movie is too dark, which is why I'm making, not too dark. It is what it is, and it's a lot of things, but I would have made it differently now. And that's why I'm doing this next movie, The Bond, but I am going to change the title. I think the title is something like The Most Important Love, because that's really right. Something like that. We'll get to the title later. But I think my hope is, my mission is that mothers and fathers, and I think fathers are very important, or partners of the same sex or whatever, however anything works now, I'm kind of open to it, are there with that little being from the very start, and and just sort of go, I don't know. So I'm going to just start talking. Okay, maybe they think I'm crazy. I don't care. I'm going to just see what happens. I know with my son, I have an 8-year-old now, almost 9. While he was in the womb, we used to read him about Pooh Bear, and that's been a major character for him until about a year and a half ago, when he said, I don't ever want to talk about Pooh Bear again because I'm now a big kid. But for a long time, it was there, So I think I do believe, as it says at the end of the movie, as Thomas Verney says, womb ecology is world ecology. That if we are able to bring children without all the difficult challenges that now exist, but that they get to grow naturally as much as possible the way they can, and we keep working on that we're going to have so many Einsteins, so many cool singers, so many, so many brilliant men and women who are going to solve all the problems that we find and feel that are unsolvable. They'll be solvable. So we can then move on. This is about evolving. That's what's going on in the womb. You start with these little tiny things and you build into a whole human being. And that's what the whole species should be doing. And I'm profoundly optimistic that, in fact, one of the things about, no, I didn't come into movies because I wanted to change the world at all. I came into movies because I got scared shitless at parties. And I thought, if I could just become famous enough that I could walk into a party and not get freaked out, that's enough. I didn't know you could make money and also lose money, but I just thought I would be able to be cool at parties if I were a film director. Let me tell you, it didn't work. It didn't work because your resident, it didn't work. What did emerge was, oh, this is a tool that can reach millions of people. Oh, maybe I can be of value. Maybe if I listen to really smart people and I work like a long time on a movie and get it really right and I make 1,000 mistakes first, then maybe it will move other people. So that's kind of where, and that makes the little kid really happy. It's really fun. It's like really fun finding the right piece of music to put on something. It's really fun to talk to really smart people. And telling you, it's really, I mean, Gabor Mate, he's a really smart guy. And it was really fun talking to him. So I think I have stumbled into, and, I'm not going to go to the place that, I had a mission when I was thrown into my mom's womb, but I think, because I don't think that's the way, I don't believe that's the way God, whatever she is thinking about, is about. She's really about us having the amazing, miraculous position to choose for ourselves. Why would she want to have people who would just sit down and worship her? What point is that? She can make galaxies, she can do all this stuff, but to have really live, you don't know what's going to happen with people, that seems to me to be what it's all about. So anyway, that's where I'm at this point.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful way of describing maybe where we are at this point in life, in a very, very fragile place, but also such an exciting time. I wonder whether it would be a good point to actually open up the room to questions of anyone else who's here. So if you're here and you would like to bring a question,
I saw a question zip up and go by. I saw sort of half see things going by. The one thing I wanted to address, then we'll pick somebody, is about adoption. Adoption is a really serious and important issue. I'm the founder and director of the Identity Development Institute, and I'll slow down. I am the founder and director of the Identity Development Institute, based on a methodology that comes out of Germany, which is being translated with Franz Rupert and IOPT and blah, blah, blah. And in the method that is quite simple, I have worked with a lot of people, a number of whom were adopted. And it's very important for everyone, and I have some friends who've also adopted children, also surrogates as well. What's happening is this little being has lived sort of on planet Mars with all of the things there, and they are taken away. And they are suddenly placed somewhere else, which is why adoption is so difficult. And I've dealt enough with and worked very closely with people and resonated the very early times. And one of the things that a friend of mine said, who is a doctor in the hospital with neonatal situations, is when a child comes into the world with parents who want that child, that birth is joyful. And the doctors pick up on it, and it's such joy and such relief. When a child that's being adopted is born, it's silent. The mother doesn't know what to do, and the doctors don't know what to do. And I experienced with someone at one point, and that's a whole nother conversation in terms of the work we do at the Institute, was the experience of being born to silence, which is a very difficult thing to deal with. It's not impossible. This person in particular, very, very successful, brilliant person, had developed strategies that were then very useful in the world, but he's suffered a lot in many ways. So anyway, I just wanted to bring up adoption. It can be addressed like everything else. It is dark and complicated, but it can be addressed. I think There's a much longer conversation on that, which is a very important conversation for all the people who have been adopted. Anyway.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. So let's go with some of the questions here in the room now. And Francesca and Raju, please can you turn on your video first? So we just want to see that you're actually in the space. Perfect, Francesca. So then we'll go with you first. Over to you.
Wow, I feel very grateful and appreciative. Stephen, I watched your film yesterday, and it has so much depth in it, and it makes sense. And when I'm reflecting on what I'm going through with regards to healing developmental trauma and how difficult it is and how challenging it is, and the depth of work necessary neurologically and biologically to heal from developmental trauma. I guess one thing I wanted to, I relate to you in terms of being in therapy, feeling like there's something wrong with me. How do I fix myself? And I've been doing this for a long time. And I've come to a point in my self-knowing, my self-awareness, where I'm connecting with that abandonment terror, which is profoundly overwhelming. And also the force of the will to survive, like the aggression that comes along with us to survive, and the things that we try to do to get our needs met so that we can survive. And I guess what I'm wondering is, how does one truly heal this?
Okay, I can speak to that, and in a number of different ways. My parents were both alcoholics. My mom was also a drug addict. So I got very involved with the 12 steps. And in the late 80s, I guess, there was adult children of alcoholics. And I was very much a part of that community. It was very, very helpful for me to understand at least a part of what was causing me problems. At a certain point, they would start carrying little toys, or they said, we're adult children, and we're going to carry these little things, or carry little babies around. And there was something about it would be healing. I mean, you'd be a little freaked out in the supermarket, and you'd see someone walk by with a little bunny that was an adult. I finally reached the point, though, where I went, I can't do this anymore, because I am not an adult child. I am an adult. I have 2 kids. I gotta make a living. I gotta function in the real world. So I kind of ultimately left it. But I think what I've come to understand, there we go. Yes, that's right. But here's the thing I would say about it. I would say that what my child needs is an adult. So what I feel about this is, so what would a mature, enlightened adult do with a child who is terrified, screaming and weeping? Dan Siegel actually is very helpful about some of that stuff. And he has a couple of books about it, but it's actually, and I've done the work enough with people who are in that place. And that's a whole nother conversation to maybe consider coming to the Identity Development Institute, which is online, and exploring it. But what I've learned is, as the parent part, as opposed to the little boy part, which you met earlier to some degree, I just stand by or sit by that part that's in terror. I don't say, it's not so bad, it's not so bad, you're going to get better. What I've learned is you can't say, hey, you're going to grow up, it's all going to be fine, because no, he hasn't really grown up. He's still there in terror. And as long as I'm just there, I mean, I wake up every night because I had some things happen to me, which I'm not going to get into now in the middle of the night, which have caused terror my whole life. Well, actually, they didn't cause terror my whole life. They caused terror when I was really doing deep therapy, and they've never gone away. But I can now go back to sleep because I just am by, and often he's in utero. So it's, and I think the other thing is trauma appears, let's say, I don't want to go too much longer on this, but what appears to be the trauma may have happened at 3 years old or 5 years old. No. It almost invariably happened in utero. That's where the real cracks are, because that's when there's no escape. So the answer is to get back to the in utero time, which we can do in this work. And that's what really shifted things for me after all this therapy, and just sit beside, just sit as an adult going, I can't fix this, but I love you and I'm here. And you can cry all you want. You can just cry. It's a little bit like this was not my major trauma, but I was also sleep. My mother let me just scream in the bed and all those things. I was the first child. After the first child, she didn't do that anymore. So I was sleep deprived. All she had to do was go in there. And just, if she'd gone in, that would have been enough. I would have calmed down. So it's just being there. That's just a grown-up being there.
Thank you. I appreciate you, because I feel like I'm doing that, but it's not pleasant. It's not very pleasant. I just wanted to add one more comment though. I'm really coming to a lot of the work I'm doing is just allowing myself to feel what arises in my experience and allow that to inform my self-understanding, and then trying to respond to that. But one thing I'm really Pete Walker was talking about the angry cry of a child, how it's in order to elicit a need getting met from the mother. And so one of those energies, the anger to me, I feel is so powerful that I had to squelch. But a lot of that anger is, I feel, what is creating violence in the world. It's this force that wants to live and exist and will do anything to do so. So I just feel like that's a connection that I feel like I'm making as I'm connecting with my own survival instincts to survive, right?
I'm not sure. I think that needs to be really worked on by people, because I think the anger of a child, first of all, the child is little, doesn't have weapons, doesn't have any of that kind of stuff, is just going, this is unjust. And I think what goes on in terms of war and all of that is a complicated perversion of many generations and many layers coming up with, I think it's somewhat what you're talking about. I think it can ultimately be resolved by us in the next 100, 200 years, working through all this stuff. I think it really is possible, but I do think it means going to the dark. I mean, one of the things I've grown aware of is it takes to go into the darkest shadows, into the deepest, darkest shadows. If they're really deep and dark, it means somewhere there's a bright sun, because you can't have the darkest shadows without somewhere there being a bright sun. So
thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. And I'm not sure whether we lost Raju now, because he was just here online. Raju, have you returned? I see you again. I would like to, yes, let's go to you. I know you had your hand up, and
thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
And just, as Francesca, just try and keep the questions essential, because we have quite a few people who would love to speak. Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Kostya. Question, Stephen. Many of us are in the collective trauma work. What's the intersection between individual trauma work and the collective trauma work? And is there a place where you think we can, for example, I did a lot of rebirthing in my life, water rebirthing, just being in the water, warm water, and then breathing and doing affirmations. And for years, I've done that for like 20 years. And after 20 years, I felt a certain amount of relief. I'm sure it doesn't take 20 years to do that, but do you have any suggestions for people who are wanting to bridge the gap between, disconnected, feeling that hole inside of them and being able to connect to themselves? And I'm going to mute.
I think, first of all, birthing and whatever happens in a birth is caused by whatever happened before that. We all have sort of been programmed to believe that life happens at birth. It actually happens at conception. And that's even a complicated thing with epigenetics and transgenerational trauma and all those things. But leaving that aside, that I think the challenge is to not necessarily focus on birth, but go back even further, because that's probably where the root of the problem, or the root of the dynamic that needs to be warmed up and witnessed so it can relax and let go. So it's a little bit like trying to solve the birth or the conception trauma or the in utero trauma by dealing with something that happened teenage years. You're not going to get to it. The other thing is about collective trauma and this work. We're all one person and we're all everything. And I think more and more it just gets clearer and clearer to me. I'm dealing with the God issue a lot now, and people would be stunned 3 years ago if they heard me talking about it. I'm coming to the conclusion that the way to get the perspective of God from planet Earth, which is a third-rate planet on an eighth-rate galaxy around a meaningless sun, nonetheless, that's what we got, means that every single human being's point of view of God, and the animals too, and the plants probably, if we could put it all together, would give us an inkling of an idea of what it is that made this whole thing. So it's like collective, individual. It becomes, again, a sort of delusion to think that even exists, although it does. I mean, I know I'm an individual, but the more I do this and the deeper I go down, the more it's like, no, it's a whole lot bigger. It's collective, you know? So I think it's, and also Kosha and I have sort of become really good friends, and I'm going, I know it has something to do with collective trauma and in utero trauma. But I can't figure it out quite yet, but it's really strong and clear.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks, Raju. Yeah, and I think Thomas would simply say that the two are so deeply intertwined that you can't have individual healing without looking at the collective and the other way around. That it's really one emergence. Yeah. Over to you, Dawn. Lovely to see you again.
Thank you. You too. And Stephen, thank you for this very powerful presentation. I hope we can get copies of it, not just the movie, but this part too. My question is directly related to terror in utero. I was in my mother's uterus when, in 1940, on a convoy leaving Britain to go to the United States. And one of the convoy was torpedoed and nobody was allowed to go for help. So the effect on my mother and all the other pregnant women on board, no doubtless there were many, and they then had to endure more days of not knowing if they were next. That would have had a tremendous impact on a fetus, on me. And I wonder if you could comment on whether you come across this of people who live in fear or who have turned to fear or sort of regress into fear during their developmental years, and rather than see the joy and positive of life in every way. And I think it varies, but I'm just interested in your perspective on that because of my own journey with trying to figure this out.
First of all, I just want to say I'm really sorry. You know, it's like, because when you say it, the problem is even more troubling than you've said, because I'm growing aware in the work we do, which is that every human being resonates out what their wounds are. And every human being can pick up, because of quantum, because we're all energy, can pick up what's gone on to the most minute detail I've discovered. So that what probably you also experienced was the death of those other people in the other boat, which is utterly bewildering and terrifying and so deep that it's because we don't yet understand how miraculous we are. On the other hand, and this makes me cry, that's what's human, is to feel the pain of others. We try to avoid it. And doing that, we avoid being how human we are. Our hearts are broken. And to me, somewhere in there, in a way that I have yet to understand, sits the treasure of collective connection. We are all really connected, but it's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's not just your mom, which was hard enough, and that's an immediate terror. But and an example I'll give is that I've worked with a lot of Holocaust, children of Holocaust survivors. These are survivors. They were never locked in the showers, these horrible things. So many of them cannot get into elevators. So many of them had problems going into spaces. Why? Because they felt what was going on in those showers. That's how connected we are. It's just, you want to talk about collective trauma? It's the whole thing. And it's also, I think, the way out. If I can be a little kid and joyful and play around and have fun, that impacts all the other little kids here. It's really so much more interesting than we were ever told it was. And we're just at the very beginning of this. So I'm sorry for you. It's a hard thing to deal with, but it's a human thing. And in that humanity and in that grief and in that inability to get through it, I think is your treasure of how human you are, how you've almost had to hold back because it's too much. To be there for other people who have to hold back because it's too much, and begin to slowly let it go. And grieve all those people. And even the other thing is that in Germany, dealing with the soldiers that shot that ship, that sunk that ship, everybody is so lost and bewildered. And that's the start, I think. That's certainly where I am a lot of the time.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Stephen. You bring us back to the beauty of bewilderment. And Dawn, as Stephen was saying that, because I hear you speaking about those moments where the terror visits you and it's alive, and that you are not alone with that. I think in our society, one of the most painful things is that we hide it in the dark of the night and in our rooms, and that we find places to share this with each other, that this is a collective experience. This
and it's an
is
individual one too. It's an individual one too, I think. In the darkest night, there is a little terrified being, tiny, tiny terrified being, but there's also a grown woman. And if that grown woman can be with that little tiny part, and the two of them connect, this is what I've discovered, they'll go back to sleep. Because I used to have trouble sleeping. I don't anymore and I have a whole connection with the maker and maintainer of the universe and me. I have a whole prayer I do now, which really comforts the child. But it's being there in the darkness of the night. It's being there with you on that ship at that moment in utero. It's possible to do.
This has been very sad and very helpful.
Yeah. And for me too.
So many other people of my age must be in exactly the same situation across the planets because of that particular war experience.
Yeah.
So many people, a culture of us.
And it's been going on for generations and generations and generations. What was it like to be invaded by Napoleon? What was it like to be in the Black Plague? We're carrying all that. But I think we really may be coming with science and with common sense and with spirituality and with all those things. I am profoundly hopeful. And so is this little kid in me going, we are discovering things. We are really doing substantive work. And you're doing it right here.
And then there's Ukraine, right?
Same thing.
And Africa. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dawn. Yeah, and while you were speaking, there were so many people speaking of their experiences in the chat as well, from different parts of the world and different generations. Thank you, Dawn. I think you spoke for many. Thank you. Yeah, we're coming to the end of our time, Stephen, and I know that Garth actually sent in a lot of questions also before this call, and I would also like to offer space to you, Susan, because you're next in line. So I was wondering whether we could bring both Susan and Garth online, hear both of your questions, ask you to keep them both essential, and then we offer space to Stephen to respond.
That's great. Hello, hello, Stephen and Gosha. And who was the other person?
Garth.
Hello.
Garth, yeah.
Hi. I'm ready, so if that's okay, I want to talk about my son. I've come from a very generations and generations of trauma. I made up my mind at a very early age that I was going to be different, and I've worked so hard. And then one day in my 40s, I found I was pregnant, the thing I wanted most, but was told that I couldn't have children. The baby was born, albeit by cesarean section, but I had been on a type of antidepressants for many, many years. Venlafaxine, I don't know what the other name for it is, but I know that they got me off it pretty quick, which meant I went into withdrawal from this medication, and my poor little baby came out. And he is having problems to this day, no matter how much I try to be a wholesome mother. You know, I've had to parent myself through this, as well as parent him. And I'm just wondering, how does that little baby inside, when it's being bombarded with drugs, and there was so much. I was at hospital practically from the beginning to the end with this. And, you know, when I saw this on Facebook, I thought, I've got to be there. I need to see this. So I'm wondering, can he recover from this?
Well, how old is he?
He's 14 now.
I think it's hard to know exactly, and it's everyone is miraculously individual. I'm slightly concerned about the word recovery, because I think he is who he is.
Yes.
He has his own journey that he has to make and pick and choose. And I have more and more of a problem with, again, as I said before, any judgment. And we talked about bewilderment and uncertainty. I think he's here. He has struggled with things. It is not your fault. I mean, we sort of talked about that. If you start to blame yourself, you are living in delusion. It's delusional to think that. And, and the people around, there's so many people judge me. I mean, it's amazing how many. Try being a director. I'm going to just be me for a second. Try being a director. Everyone thinks they can direct. Everyone, they go on the sets, everyone thinks they can direct. The same thing is with being a mother. You did what you could do. This is the world you're in. He's 14. You don't know yet what miracles he may bring into the world because of who he is. And you can't judge any of that, except I think it's the same thing, to be there beside him. But yeah. I also think coming back to the internal journey, the most important person I think here is the little you that lived in a family of trauma, and to be with her and to be there for her and for him, because the more you can be there for her, that little person, the more you're going to be able to be there for him with all the intricacies of who he is.
Yes, you are echoing what my own therapist says.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Garth.
Thank you, Susan. And Garth.
Thanks, Stephen and Kusha. Thanks for hosting this. This is wonderful. And thanks for your film, Stephen. I watched it twice and just, I just bouncing off the walls ever since. One thing I noticed in the film is that there was a lot of emphasis on kind of behavioral and emotional disorders related to perinatal trauma, so ADHD, violence, anxiety, depression, addiction. And I was wondering, in your conversations with, say, Gabor or the other speakers, if you came across a connection with more physical illnesses like what I'm struggling with, which is Crohn's disease. For me, it's really the level of denial in my family and community is intense. You know, it's like you talk about blame, and for me, it's more seeing the connections and holding responsible for the people that were hurtful to me when I was young, without kind of letting them off the hook, which is so easy to do. You know, my family is highly celebrated. My mother's a saint. My father was a very senior military officer in Cold War stuff. So the violence is subtle, but it's there, and I can see it. You know, the stress is clearly there in my mother right up until 15 months, and then the third trimester. So this connection between Crohn's disease and early kind of in utero experience is important for me to understand if you ran into it with some of your speakers.
Yes, I think absolutely. You know, so I uncovered, first of all, I've been very successful in my life, and yet in my family, my brothers and sisters, and with other people, I have been known as the crazy one. I was always crazy, still crazy. Nothing I seem to be able to do to break that. And I've given up because I have lived outside the box. I've lived a pretty wild life. I mean, you go to Hollywood and you do, you know, all this stuff, you know, it's like, so, and I think, you know, there's a saying that I really like, because I'm also doing a lot of writing. You know what the worst curse of a family is to have a writer born into it, because it's all going to come out. And the child who is the black sheep in the family is the child who's dangerous, because he or she is speaking to the dysfunction in that family, which no one wants to deal with because they've just wanted to survive. There's a suicide here, there's a drug person here, there's a sexual perversion over there. They just want to put it in the closet and just keep going and wear Prada, maybe not Prada, that's Hollywood, but whatever it is, it's just sort of, you know, we're going to just cover it up. They do it at their peril, and the planet does it at its peril. Crohn's disease, we don't know. You know, what I would do is be curious about it, be the little kid about it. Do I think it's in utero? Do I think it's trauma impacted? But how? So here's what I've come to learn. So we do these sessions in the Institute, and it's been slowly growing. And I'm now in the process. Part of what this is about is I've been doing this for 5 or 6 years. I'm going to scale it and turn it into something much bigger. There's sessions that can take you back to in utero time very quickly. Because as Bessel van der Kolk talks about, it's in the body. It's all about resonating, and I don't want to get into it. It's like someone said, I got to talk more slowly. It's like what someone said is, don't ever talk about how the iPhone works. Just say it works. And this work takes you back to in utero, to conception, to birth, to all those things. And in that work, you will slowly untangle how whatever happened to you caused what they call Crohn's disease. Oh. It is different for every single human being. And so it's about working through all that stuff. And the reason I'm here and the reason I'm doing this is because it saved my life. So I can say, and I'm talking about it more and more openly, I discovered first that I was raped by my grandfather between 4 and 6 years old. I thought that was the trauma, serious trauma. I'm now not actually sure that one of the reasons I survived that and buried it for years and didn't remember it was because of what happened in utero when I had trauma there that shut down parts of me that could handle that. That's how complicated it gets. So I've slowly uncovered in doing this work the truths that are way outside the box. And let me tell you, no family wants to hear what I talk about. No family. But too bad. That's what happened. So I think you can get there, but it's not an easy journey, and it's a very specific journey. And it's an important journey because if you can get back there and uncover what it was and how it happened and why you as this miraculous infinite organism, which is hard to figure out, came up with this solution. Was it, for instance, that something happened and your brain went, we got to protect the brain, let this part of him go? That dynamic, if you can get back to that dynamic, and if you can accept that that dynamic is healthy, not screwed up, but healthy, I think it can be untangled. Is it easy? No. Are we at the beginning of a journey? Hopefully the shoulders that we're all on will be the shoulders on which people in the future solve some of these. We'll do the best we can. But I hope you can untangle it, because it's not fun, I know.
I've done a lot of work, but it's I was noticing the emphasis on physical illnesses was weaker in the film than I was wanting. And
you can't cover everything. It's like
I appreciate you saying that, you're the black sheep. I feel like in a way myself, I'm in a weird spot though. As the eldest boy in a military family, I was celebrated, and yet I was hurt. And so I'm dealing with this real weird dichotomy of being the black sheep and kind of the golden boy at the same time. It's bizarre.
Yeah, me too. I was the oldest. So it's but we figure it out. We do the best we can. It's, but
thanks
I
thanks
think
for making a film.
Yeah, thank you, Garth. Thank you, Susan. And I think you'll both want to really go back and look at the chat. Everybody, just remember that you can save the chat. If you click on the 3 dots in the chat, you can save it. But there was also some interesting feedback in the chat for you both, Garth and Susan, so don't miss out on that. Thank you so much for coming online, you and everybody else who's been here. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, Garth. And Stephen, what an amazing conversation. I feel like you jumped out of the box here with us tonight. You've kind of reconstituted all the black sheep amongst us. That caused a lot of resonance in the chat. I think many of us are really recognizing ourselves in that. And being a movie maker and now also writer that you are, I can imagine that it's not just easy for your family, but what a gift to us and what a gift to the world.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to applaud the young boy in you, the one that is so curious and so excited about being alive, and the way you express that. It's beautiful to be able to share in it. Thank you so much for being with us.
And thank you for all of you being here. It's a joy. I mean, the grown-up me, the old me, and the little boy me, both, hold on, both, every once in a while the phone rings and I thought the phone was off. Hold on a second. I was being so articulate and the phone rang, and then technology. It's hard to have grown up in an era when the IBM Selectric was the mode of communication, and trying to function with all this stuff going on, but somehow we do it. And I just want to say, it's just a pleasure seeing all of you. It's and an honor. I mean, and it's just plain fun. Yeah, that's the biggest thing, is it's just plain fun. And Kosha, it's, we just have fun every time, even as we're dealing with, and I think it's critical that the darker you go, like Shakespeare knew, the darker you go, you better have a sense of humor in there somewhere. You just better. And some joy all the way along. That's sort of that's the torch that you get to carry when you're in the dark cave sometimes.
Yeah, and I think for some of us, it's also just really helpful to be able to speak out some of the darkness, and then bring the humor and the joy, but also not skirt away from it too much.
Yeah.
Stephen, thank you, and we'll be back We know that you have a next movie coming out and that you're also going to work more deeply within Utero, and we would like to accompany you every step of the path and with gratitude for this friendship. Thank you.
Right back at you all, absolutely.
Great, and we'll just complete with a few announcements. So please, all of you who haven't watched the movie, it's still going to be online and it's going to go out to you. And I do believe that this conversation will have deepened the experience. So you can get access to watch the movie until September 15th. And that includes the evening of the 15th for all of you in California. So still a while, invite your friends, invite your family, share it with others. And also, you know, the way that we're here tonight, but we also bring it to other areas of work. So our global social witnessing calls, where we bring our witnessing capacities as human beings to people who are going through difficult times, not just in utero, but in the womb of the living world. And we're having a whole series of 3 calls on forced displacement. And this is going to be focused more on Europe this time, but just as an exemplary area for what is happening in the world. Forced displacement and refugees in Europe, present and future. And this will be on September 21st. Then September 22nd, we'll look at the African diaspora, searching for a better future. And then on September 23rd, Saturday, we'll be looking at the Ukrainian diaspora in Europe, fleeing from war, and just looking at these 3 themes to honor one of the big crisis areas in our world at this moment, which is millions and billions of people that are on the run in forced displacement, many of them, of course, pregnant mothers. And how can we provide a loving, heartful, collective space for each other in these times. So we're welcoming you. You can sign up. All these calls are for free, and we're grateful to share it with you all. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Stephen, for being with us today. And we trust and pray that the seeds of this call and of the movie grow into beautiful flowers and deeper relatedness in each of you and each of us. Be well.
Everybody take care. Take care.
And thank you to the team. Thank you, Alfred. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, Anna. Thank you, Sunita. Thank you, Susan. Just seeing you there.